What happens when federal power pushes so hard that it shakes the very idea of state control? That is the urgent and unsettling question facing the country today. Just after midnight, a federal judge in Minnesota prepared to consider an extraordinary legal challenge that could redefine the balance between Washington and the states. This is not a routine courtroom debate. It is a moment that goes to the heart of sovereignty, safety, and trust in government. Later this morning, a judge will hear arguments on a question that many legal experts once thought was almost unthinkable. Can a deployment of federal law enforcement officers become so dangerous, so overwhelming, and so intrusive that it violates state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment? That is exactly what the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul are arguing right now. The cities claim that the Trump administration's surge of roughly 3,000 immigration and federal enforcement agents into Minnesota crossed a constitutional line. According to local leaders, this operation went far beyond normal federal authority. They say it created chaos, fear, and violence rather than order and safety. As a result, they have asked a judge to temporarily halt the surge while the court reviews its legality. This federal operation has already been linked to 3 deadly shootings, thousands of arrests, and widespread public outrage. Streets have filled with protests, communities are tense, trust between residents and authorities has frayed badly. City officials argue that instead of helping local law enforcement, this federal presence has overwhelmed it and made the situation far worse. One lawmaker speaking on the issue said the 10th Amendment is not just a decoration or an old idea from history. He said he kept the text of the amendment hanging outside his office in Congress for most of his career because it mattered. The amendment clearly states that all powers not specifically given to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. In his view, what has happened in Minnesota violates that principle in a serious way. He argued that the sweeping actions taken by federal agents go far beyond what the federal government should be allowed to do. He described a pattern in which agents enter states, carry out deadly operations, and then remove themselves from any local accountability. In some cases, he said, federal authorities allegedly shut down investigations, move involved agents out of state, and prevent local officials from fully examining what happened. One of the most troubling cases involves the killing of a Minnesota resident who, according to available information, had no criminal record. Local officials say they were denied the opportunity to properly investigate the death. Instead, they claim the federal government took control of the situation, removed key individuals, and limited transparency. To many residents, this felt like justice being taken out of their hands. Supporters of the lawsuit say this is exactly why the 10th Amendment exists. They argue it was designed to stop the federal government from using overwhelming force inside states without consent or cooperation. They believe this case will test whether that constitutional protection still has real meaning today. Observers across the country are calling this a fascinating and deeply important case. Arguments are expected to focus on whether the federal government can deploy what looks like a national police force inside a state, even when local officials have clearly said they do not want it there. This issue feels especially urgent given the events of the past few weeks in Minnesota. What many people have seen on the ground are ICE agents and Border Patrol officers operating in ways that resemble a federalized police force acting directly at the White House's direction. Local leaders have repeatedly said they did not ask for this help and do not believe it has made their communities safer. Behind the scenes, there are also reports that the president's advisors are still discussing whether to invoke the Insurrection Act. That law would allow the president to deploy even more federal force inside the state. Politically, this would be extremely difficult, especially as some Republicans have begun to push back. Still, officials say the option has not been fully ruled out. This possibility has added to the anxiety in Minnesota and beyond. Many Americans remember past moments when the Insurrection Act was discussed or used, and they understand how serious such a step would be. Even the conversation about it signals how high the stakes have become. During a recent discussion, attention turned to the president's own statements about the situation. While earlier remarks seemed firm, later remarks appeared more uncertain. The president stopped short of clearly saying that the killing carried out by federal agents was done by the book. He did not directly say the agents acted correctly. Instead, he began to hedge. He spoke about the possibility of leaving the situation behind and suggested that his administration had already accomplished great things. To some observers, this language sounded familiar. It echoed moments in the past when he appeared to be preparing to step away from a controversial issue. Critics argue that by now the president must understand how damaging these policies have been to his public support. Poll numbers have reportedly continued to fall as images and stories from Minnesota spread nationwide. The role of senior advisor Stephen Miller and the aggressive enforcement approach has become a major political liability. A key moment came during a 5-minute phone call between the president and a Wall Street Journal reporter. Many analysts carefully studied that exchange for clues. Some concluded that the president sounded cautious and uncertain, even as he tried to defend the broader strategy. The administration has suggested ICE agents might be pulled back. At the same time, officials floated the idea that other federal agencies could step in to investigate what they described as alleged misconduct. This dual message has left many people confused about the true direction of policy. According to insiders, the president and his team are well aware of public opinion. They see the same polls as everyone else. They know many Americans are unhappy with how events in Minnesota have unfolded. Yet, despite this awareness, the president posted a long message on social media just hours before the interview that doubled down on the decision to send federal agents in the first place. That message did not focus on the specific behavior of individual agents. Instead, it defended the presence of ICE and Border Patrol in Minnesota as a whole. The president strongly blamed local officials, arguing that their resistance caused the unrest. He claimed that in states like Florida or Texas, where local leaders cooperate with ICE, there are no protests, no chaos, and no violence. According to this argument, protests themselves are the source of the problem. Many critics strongly reject this claim, pointing to video evidence of the shootings and saying the facts do not support that narrative. People across the country have watched the footage. They have seen the moments that led to 2 of the killings. For them, the idea that protests alone caused the violence does not match what their own eyes show. As this situation continues to unfold, the country is waiting to see what the president will do next. Will he invoke the Insurrection Act? Will he pull back federal agents? Or will he once again choose escalation over restraint? So far in this term, critics note a clear pattern. Each time the president has been given an opportunity to de-escalate a tense situation, he has chosen not to do so. Instead, he has leaned into confrontation, even when it deepens divisions and fuels distrust. That distrust has only grown as federal agencies such as DHS and Border Patrol made rapid public claims about the victims involved. In at least one case, officials labeled the victim a domestic terrorist and a would-be assassin within an hour of the shooting, before the scene was fully secured. Making such claims without a full investigation has alarmed many Americans. They believe it undermines faith in law enforcement and damages the relationship between citizens and their government. For some, it feels less like a mistake and more like a deliberate strategy. Perhaps, as some critics suggest, that erosion of trust is not an accident at all.